Alright, so maybe we need an entity class. Where should we put this? Top level? Entity. Export class entity. And constructor takes an ID, name, and list of components. I guess this can have a type and a data. And then it can have a mesh. So it needs a scene. And it also takes a internal mesh, right? So we have mesh or meshes. Let's say that it's a mesh. Okay, so we have our entity class. Now we just modify the scene manager when we're reacting to if the message type is box, then we'll just go in and create it like this, right? We'll say, so maybe you can retain box, so we'll create entity, let's call this entity base. And let's create a folder for entities. So what if you have a box entity? And so here, export class box entity extends entity base. Constructor has all the args. Just call super with the args. We do args. Is it like a splat operator, or how do you do this? So yes, pass all constructor args to super. Dot 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 args. Dot dot dot. Spread must have a tuple type or might pass to the rest of the program. What? A spread argument must either have a tuple type constructor spread args pass it to the super. So you're saying the super must be like an object. Like that. So we did this. No. Well, I like this less. I liked it the way it was before, where it's explicit what are the things I need. So if we just have to copy this over again, I guess I'm fine with that. Just go here. The constructor takes the same arguments, and we'll just call super with the same arguments here. We'll just go ID. We'll say ID, name, components, scene. Components, scene. What's this? Yeah. We'll import everything as Babylon from WRS. What's okay? So the box will do that. In fact, this gives us the opportunity, if we wanted to, have different kind of parameters for like height, whatnot. But no, everything is stored as a component. So I'm actually not sure that this box entity will do anything differently. Okay, but the first thing the base entity should do is store the components, which we have. So components are there, it knows its name and ID, and I think we should enable tags, right? So Babylon tags enable for this. And then does JavaScript have something like a class variable? Like variables that are shared amongst classes. I guess you just make it outside of class. Okay, we have base entity, we have box entity, so we can create the box entity, which will create that, and yes, it needs to create your mesh, right? Right, that you don't know how to make. So in the scene manager, where's our scene manager? What were we doing here? Here we were doing this create box and adding all these things. Well, we shouldn't add those things. We should allow them to come to us in components. So collidable, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so create box, what does this do? This create box does this. Mesh builder, okay, so we go back to box entity. We'll do that, and then we'll implement a create mesh. Maybe entity base can be an abstract class. Type script abstract class. Abstract class constructor extends this, and then you need to implement create mesh. Okay. Export abstract class entity base, and we'll do create mesh. Abstract file. Okay, so we go abstract. So abstract this, and then just a return type gives you an abstract mesh. Oh, it takes a type, so it takes nothing. And returns a Babylon abstract mesh. Okay, so here does not implement abstract with create mesh, so we have to implement create mesh, and that will do this. So we'll create this.name, this argify components. What was argify components? Manager argify components was to take those things components, and then if it's not on there, then create an object with the type. Okay, so it makes them objects so that you can inject them. So okay, like height, width, those kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, well, let's do that on the entity base. Argify components. So this takes a list of components that are and returns key values that may or may not work with that belongs mesh builder. So now we can say this argufy this components is seen. So that will create the mesh. And in Scene Manager currently for the create box, okay, so if it's a type of box, putting aside these things right now, I can just comment this out. And is there anything else that uses this create box? No, it's the only instance of it. Then I can come over here. There's only one, so nothing's calling it. Oh, just create box, the definition of it, so we can get rid of this. We can come over here to create box, and then we'll just say mesh equal new box entity, given the entity ID, the entity name, the entity components, and this scene. And oh, okay. Right. This is actually expecting a mesh, and we're giving back an entity. So we'll say for right now abstract mesh or some kind of base entity. Cannot find name base entity base. Will it allow it? It's an abstract class. Will it allow it to be meshed as a type? Import entity base. So where's our create box again? Or new entity box. Okay, and it's okay with that? Okay. In which case, ID, type, metadata, and all that. Okay. some things here will be broken down here. Mesh metadata equal. And then you want to set the component which will create and start an animation to appear. Okay, so we'll move this into the base entity. So after the mesh is created, so copy this. And we'll put this in entity base. So after you create your mesh, so you'll do this, this create mesh, and then what is this? This is set. So ID, okay, so we'll set adders on mesh. Set mesh extra adders. And it will be this mesh ID will be this ID. This metadata will be this. Oh, we don't have a type. Okay, so the type, let's force it to implement a type. How about that? Base entity must say abstract type, and it must be a string. So then this must, the type must be box. So an entity base will say that it must be this type, this mesh metadata, and then this mesh, set it to editable, and signal hub, we'll commit this mesh name, and this type. Import signal hub. Set mesh adders. Okay, we'll just set these things. So for this, set mesh adders. That's what happens in the super. Okay, box entity. Okay, back in the scene manager. So then we won't need this. If the class will take care of that. And then finally, we'll animate in. Copy this, go to the base, and we'll call this animate on create. And we're going to have a mesh, so this components for each. So we only want to do position, rotation, and scale. And what is set component? Set component. Let's go back to scene manager. Set component. Okay, sets this on the mesh. So right now we can only handle color, position, scaling, rotation. I prefer to break these out. Well, if you send the component, you're saying mesh. Yeah, you're setting them, right? But what is the animation doing? Appear, so position. Oh, then you're just having it come down from something high up. Okay, right. So let's create these functions called set, position, rotation, and scale. So where's this? We'll go here. We'll just copy some of these things. Copy this, and we'll put this into the entity base. All right, so we'll do set color. We'll do set position. Set position from component. Set color from component. Set rotation from component. Set scale from component. Okay, let's do the position. Should be easier, which will be position scaling is just this. Okay, so first you need the component. So get component by type, and you give it the type, which is a string, and then this components, which is a list, and then you do filter, where the component and component dot type is equal to the type you provided, and then the result is this, and if result length greater than 0, then return result 0, else return null. And so you get first this get component by type position, and this can be the position component because of that, and if position component, then this mesh position copy from, or naturally, copy from floats, which would be position comp dot data dot value. This would be the position array. Let position array equal this. And you'd get, actually from array, right? From array. And we can just do position array. You get component by position, and then you set that. And I think it's the same for scale. You copy that, and this will be scale. Let's just call this component. If there's a component, then component, and this will be scaling. I think this is called scaling as well. Let's come back to the notes here. It's called scaling, yes. Position, scaling, and then finally rotation. We'll do it this way. So first we'll get the component, and if we have the component, and the raw value will be the component data value, new quaternion. So if the raw value has a length of 3, then say that's a new quaternion. Otherwise, it's a quaternion. And then if this mesh quaternion is null, then this mesh equals that quaternion. Else this mesh copy from the quaternion. Okay, so that sets the rotation. Set rotation, set scale, and then finally set color. So you can do find or create material. So we need to grab that. Find or create material. And we'll just lift this. And import mat. We find or create material. This probably can just be a utility. This can be used in multiple places, I think. Okay, so why don't we put this into a utility? So cut. We'll go to utils. And maybe just say export const find or create material equal this. You give it ops and then a scene, which is a Babylon scene. And then just take scene, get material by name, and we need to import Babylon. And material. So we'll look over at scene manager, and this is how we do this. 2 minus the one in the middle, copy. Coming into utils, go to the top. And we'll remove this one. And we'll remove ammo. Okay, const. Blah, blah, blah. Looks good. Okay, so we have this find or create material. We'll close this now. Go to entity base, and we'll just go import find or create material from utils, and then here set color from component, we'll just do What was this doing? We're just doing this. Yep, copy. And paste it in here, but first we're going to see if we can get the component. Component. So now we'll do something similar to this, where we're looking for color, position, scaling, rotation, scaling, position. So looking for color. This will be, let's see, position array. This will just be raw value. This is array. Comp, and this will be color string. So define or create material given the type, and we also need the scene, and then the value is the color string, which you can just do that way, and then this mesh would be that. Let's see this. Okay, so you animate on create. So first you set these other things. So create mesh, set mesh. Maybe not set mesh adders. Let's just say mesh ID. This whatever ID add tags. Mesh name. This type. Alright, fine. Let's do this set position from component, this set rotation from component, this set scale from component, this set color from component. We'll do all these things, and then we'll do animate on create, which means we don't need to do this. We're going to animate this mesh, right? And then animation frame per second. So let's grab some of these things, the constants here, grab these, put them into the top, animation base, sorry, entity base, and then we're going to animate just the position flying in from this mesh position. X is fine, this mesh position Z is fine, but we fly in from high up, 10 meters up, and end up at this position clone. I'm not sure if we even need the clone. This is where you end up. And in fact, we only need to modify position y, right? So appear this mesh position dot y starting from this mesh position y plus 10, ending at this mesh position. So that's the entity base class. It should create something and make it fly in. So we'll go back to scene manager, down to box entity. We're going to do that. Create a new box entity, and then down below where we're getting all these errors, we will not do this. Okay, so if mesh dot mesh return mesh else just return mesh as Babylon abstracts mesh. Got some error. Uncaught in promise. Cannot read properties. Reading. Undefined. XR manager was undefined. Any other problems? No other problems? Let's see that. Scene manager, okay. Uncaught property setting, undefined setting ID, right here. This mesh ID cannot be set to this ID. This mesh ID. And why is that? Oh, because did this not return a mesh? It did. It returned a mesh. We did a create box. And so if you call the super and the super calls create mesh, we go create mesh, which means mesh should be populated. Oh, you need to set the mesh equal to it, right? This mesh equal this mesh. Oh, now we have a grid and we have the stairs. It's a weird angle for me, but back up. Oh, the camera tipped on its side. Oh, okay. We need something that reoriented the camera to be facing front, which I think we can do like this. Scene active camera dot rot. What's our absolute rotation? Okay. Let's just do this then. 0, 0, 0, 1. New Babylon Quaternion. I don't know if I can set the absolute rotation. Set rotation. Can you clear rotation? Clear. Rotation in Z equals 0. Can I do that? Doesn't seem to do anything. Forward, backward, and that's right. Anyway, we seem to be messed up all our grid. Refresh. I'm not sure if a refresh will actually fix this. Yeah, it didn't fix it. Yeah, this rotation is messed up. Up, down, left, right, up, down. Emit something so we know we're in fly mode. Go to inline, bind F key for flight. Okay, so if this flying is false, then add the flying keyboard input, which would be signal hub is it local? You just make it incoming emit HUD broadcast, and the message can be message flying mode. Otherwise, flying mode off. So if we refresh, 1, 2, and 3, F. What is going on? It didn't bind. Huh? What console.log do we got here? Right here. Okay, we got there. Okay, so maybe it's the incoming broadcast that's not working. Fly mode on. Fly mode off. Fly mode on. Fly mode off. Okay, so something's wrong with the incoming HUD broadcast. emit HUD broadcast. So who's listening to HUD broadcast? There should be the heads up display message. Are we listening to... No, we're not. Incoming HUD message is all we're listening to. How did we end up on the other thing? This is incoming emit HUD message. Which is this. Message. Do we have both of them on? Fly mode off. Damn it. Okay. Under signal hub for incoming, we have HUD broadcast when it's coming from someone else, and we still have HUD message. Okay, we might want to consolidate one of these. Consolidate, it's confusing. Next. Consolidate HUD message versus HUD broadcast. Incoming. In the meantime, let's just close this so we get a new session. Oh, you know what? This grid may not be drawn. Maybe this is correct, turning left and right. So maybe I am oriented correctly. It's the plane that isn't, and that threw me off. So grid is no longer respecting its rotation, that's why. So grid is just a plane, right? Grid is a special kind of construct. So we can create an entity for grid. Yeah. And so we have a grid entity. And going back into the scene manager, how did we create a grid thing? Create grid maybe, or grid. Okay, so when we wanted to create a grid, we did this. And we said grids were teleportable. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it over on grid entity. Okay, so this type is a grid. And this is how we create the mesh. This name. Size, side orientation, double side, the scene, mesh collisions. So everything should be set from properties. Physics imposter, and find and create material and type grid. So this will just import quick fix from utils. And material, and then it's portable, and then return the mesh. So in the scene manager, instead of calling all of this, what if you just said that the mesh was equal to new grid entity passing along the entity ID, the entity name, entity components, and finally the scene. Okay, so then it looks like the components included that rotation n. If I were to reference this object from the mesh, then I could peek into these things by doing the common queries. For entity base, if we set the mesh attributes, so we have the type, but then I can also say that the instance, or how about class, or what is it? Let's call it instance for now, becomes this. Which means that if I do that, and let's say I get a hold of the grid, or scene get mesh by we have that many meshes already. Okay, let me peek at their IDs then. Meshes, map, and that name, avatar left, avatar right, grid, box, teleportation point. Okay, so we want this grid. Grid equals scene get mesh by name. It's grid underscore xjc9kx. Grid. Ooh. Damn it. Grid dot metadata dot instance metadata dot instance, and now I can get the components, so I can get back that data. Let's not misspell instance. Or should we just call it components? Okay, let's take a break here.